Imagine trusting someone so completely that you let your guard down in the one place where trust is supposed to be impossible, a prison. Imagine sharing not just secrets, but intimacy, only to later discover that hidden within that closeness was something that could change your life forever. This is not a fairy tale or a love story. It is the chilling account of Sarah Myers, a 29-year-old inmate at an Alabama women's correctional facility, and Warden Jackson Reed, a man whose authority was absolute until one secret unraveled everything. Their forbidden relationship began in whispers and ended in blood. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Now let's begin. Sarah Myers grew up in a small Alabama town, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone's business. She was the daughter of a factory worker and a nurse aide. And though her family worked hard, money was always scarce. At 17, Sarah dreamed of leaving her hometown to study nursing. Instead, she fell in with the wrong crowd. A string of bad decisions, shoplifting, minor drug offenses, eventually an armed robbery gone wrong, landed her in prison. Her sentence was long enough that her 20s would slip away behind bars. By the time she entered the correctional facility, Sarah was hardened, but still carried the spark of someone who once wanted more. Jackson Reed was nearly 20 years older. Born into a military family, he believed in discipline, order, and responsibility. His career in corrections was steady, climbing the ladder from guard to assistant warden, eventually becoming warden of the Alabama Women's Correctional Facility. Colleagues described him as firm but fair, the kind of man who knew the rules and enforced them without hesitation. To his community, he was respected, even admired. At home, however, cracks were forming. His marriage was strained, his teenage daughter barely spoke to him. Reed poured himself into his work, believing the prison system was his duty, his way of keeping order in a chaotic world. He never expected that duty to lead him into temptation. Sarah and Reed's paths crossed during a disciplinary hearing. Sarah had filed repeated grievances about prison medical care, claiming her requests were ignored. Reed listened more closely than expected, noting her calm, articulate manner. Unlike other inmates who shouted or cursed, Sarah spoke with conviction, choosing her words carefully. That left an impression. Over time, their interactions increased. A note slipped through staff channels, a brief private conversation in his office under the pretense of reviewing paperwork. The line between professional and personal blurred. Soon, Sarah and Reed were meeting more often. Their conversations stretched longer than necessary. Sarah confided details of her childhood. Reed admitted frustrations with his family. The power imbalance was clear. He was the warden, she was the inmate. But in those stolen moments, both pretended they were equals. What started as conversation became something more. Late one evening, after weeks of mounting tension, Reed crossed the line. In his office, behind locked doors, the two shared intimacy that should never have happened. That night was the first of many. They had sexual intercourse. Both knew the risks. Discovery could end Reed's career. Sarah's life inside could become unbearable. Still, desire outweighed reason. What Reed didn't know was that Sarah carried a secret. Years before her arrest, she had tested positive for HIV. Inside prison, she had received limited treatment, often delayed or inconsistent. Fear and shame kept her from disclosing her condition. She knew that revealing it might isolate her from other inmates, and now from the only man who seemed to see her more than just a number. Months passed. Their relationship deepened, becoming reckless. Reed would sneak Sarah favors, extra phone minutes, improved cell assignments. Sarah, in return, gave him attention he no longer received at home. But secrecy carries weight, and secrets eventually demand a light. Reed began to notice his health shifting. Fatigue clung to him. He lost weight. His appetite faded. At first he blamed stress. His job was demanding, after all. But one day, a persistent fever forced him into the doctor's office. Routine blood work led to an unthinkable result.
Reed tested positive for HIV. The diagnosis was a shockwave. In his mind, there was only one possible source. That night, he confronted Sarah during a private meeting. His voice was low, but shaking, anger and fear mixing in every word. Sarah froze. Her eyes filled with tears as she admitted what she had never wanted to say aloud. Yes, she had known. Yes, she had kept it from him. She insisted it wasn't about malice. She feared rejection, feared being left alone again. But to Reed, it was betrayal in its purest form. The confrontation left both shattered. Reed felt violated, stripped of trust. Sarah, cornered, pleaded for understanding. Their bond had been built on secrecy, but this was a secret too heavy to survive. Word began to spread. Staff whispered, rumors circulated. In a place where reputation was everything, the mighty Warden was now a victim
of his own choices. The fallout was immediate. Reed's marriage collapsed after the truth reached his wife. His colleagues treated him with pity and judgment. The administration quietly launched an internal investigation. Meanwhile, Sarah was placed in medical isolation, the prison's way of protecting both her and the facility's image. Alone, in a small, sterile room, she replayed every moment, every decision that brought her here. Her health was fragile, her spirit fractured. Reed spiraled. The once proud warden avoided eye contact with his staff, haunted by whispers behind his back. He struggled with guilt. He had broken the law, broken his vows, broken the trust of those he led. Yet beneath the anger still lingered conflicted feelings towards Sarah. Was she a manipulator, or was she simply a desperate woman clinging to the only human connection she had? The pressure mounted. Anonymous letters arrived at Reed's home, threatening exposure. Someone inside the prison had discovered their affair and saw leverage. Sarah feared retaliation from other inmates who saw her as the woman who took down the warden. Every day, the walls closed in tighter. Then came the breaking point. One night, Reed was found dead in his residence, just outside prison grounds. The scene was violent. Blood on the floor, evidence of a struggle. The news spread like wildfire. Within hours, Sarah was named the prime suspect. Police descended on the prison. Sarah was dragged from her cell, interrogated for hours. She denied involvement, insisting she hadn't seen Reed outside of sanctioned meetings. Investigators, however, painted a damning picture. Motive, opportunity, betrayal. To them, Sarah had infected the warden, ruined his life, and silenced him to protect herself. But not all the evidence fit. Forensic reports revealed inconsistencies, fingerprints that weren't Sarah's, timelines that didn't match. Another name surfaced. Officer Daniels, a long-serving corrections officer who despised Reed for going soft on inmates. Daniels had also noted the affair through overheard conversations and had been among those sending Reed threats. At trial, Sarah's fate hung in balance. She became a symbol not just of the affair, but of the dangers of crossing boundaries between inmate and authority. In the end, Daniels was convicted of Reed's murder, but Sarah wasn't free. She returned to prison to serve her original sentence, marked forever by the scandal that bore her name. Sarah's health declined over the years, but she lived long enough to tell her side to anyone willing to listen. Some saw her as a victim of circumstance, others as a manipulator whose silence destroyed lives. Reed was remembered as a man who strayed from his own principles and paid the ultimate price. The tragedy raised haunting questions about power, secrecy, and human need. In a place designed to strip people of connection, what happens when connection defies rules? Was Sarah simply clinging to love, or did her silence cross into cruelty? Could Reed have walked away before it was too late? And now we ask you, how would you feel if someone you trusted carried a secret that endangered your life? Do you see Sarah as guilty of betrayal or a broken woman trapped by fear? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for staying with us through the story. If you found it thought-provoking, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss our next deep dive into the darkest corners of human choices.